Hey, great day, y'all. So, in this podcast episode, we are going to be talking about how God will tell you that you are playing too small. And so, if you have been battling with some internal mindset shifts that you want to change, if you've been thinking about what kind of season you're in your business and in your life and how they impact one another, and if you also realize that your definition of productivity has changed over the last probably few years, then you definitely want to tap into this podcast episode. Welcome to Overthinking to Overflow, the podcast where entrepreneurs and big dreamers like yourself stop standing in the way and start stepping into alignment, clarity, and abundance. I'm Dr. TK, clinical psychologist, business mentor, and your guide to shifting from overthinking to unstoppable action. In each episode, we'll explore mindset shifts, self-care, and aligned strategies to help you reclaim your energy, your time, and purpose so that you can pour into your dreams from a cup that is overflowing. So let's break through the limits holding you back and create the life and business you're destined for. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Hey, great day, y'all. So first off, I want to say big congratulations to the podcast community on Apple, on Spotify, on YouTube, because today marks my 500th podcast episode. You heard me correct, 500 podcast episodes. So I decided to do this particular episode on the evening of Father's Day, June 15th, because I just went back and forth with a good friend of mine on Voxer. This is pretty much how we stay in contact. And I was sharing with her a download that I received on my walk, talk, prayer that I do from time to time, which means that I pretty much get outside, put on some headphones, and I do a walk and talk prayer. And then I probably put on some soothing music or maybe even some beach music because your girl likes to be by water. And I allow God to come in if that's during the time where he wants to come in. And he always just like drops some huge nuggets. And when she responded and said, "Girl, I'm going to take that download for myself," I was like, you know what? I need to go ahead and share it with other people. So today we are going to be talking about how God said you are actually playing too small. So this podcast episode is going to be broken up into 3 different parts. We're first going to talk about the internal comparison that you have against yourself. We're going to also go over seasons of your business that I'm going to share my personal experience. And if you resonate with this, then definitely, write down your nuggets. And then I'm also going to be sharing what productivity may mean in different seasons and how you can pretty much like not beat up on yourself. Okay. So let's go ahead and go into the internal comparison syndrome. And so most recently, I just started reading a book called The Artist's Way. Now, this is a book that I heard about from a few YouTube content creators. Then, of course, when I'm interested in something, I have to decide, or I choose to decide, if I want to listen to the Audible version, if I want to get the book. And sometimes I need to get both because maybe the book is a little dry. And I like to listen to, especially if it is the author, I like to listen to their voice explain the book. And then this particular book has activities. It's actually a 12-week program per se. So being a clinical psychologist, I thought to myself, okay, this can be like another form of a therapeutic resource for me because I'm going to tell y'all what I've been going through recently. Okay. And then we'll like track back a little bit so I can even tell you what also happened in our last week group coaching call with our Scale Academy students. So as I started reading The Artist's Way, I realized that one of the things that drew me into this book is because, when I go on YouTube and I start watching review videos, I enjoyed how people were talking about tapping into their level of artist or artistry. And I have been yearning to tap back into hobbies that I've had in the past. Like I've done travel journals, I've done vision board journals, scrapbooking. I have all of the materials. I've had them for 2 to 3 years. And for whatever reason, I cannot sit still to get it done. I also want to develop more hobbies. I want to really hone in on my physical health because I've gained weight. Now, some people may say, oh, it's because of your hormones, you 44. And I get all of that, but that's no excuse related to my choices of like how I eat. You know what I'm saying? And so I really want to hone in on my physical health and make that like on a whole nother level better. And then I also want to continue to spend the amount of time that I choose to and overflow with my family. So what's been happening with internal comparison is, and some of the stuff will make more sense when I start sharing the seasons in business, is in 2021 and 2022, those were some of my biggest 12-month year in terms of like revenue cash collected. So if you're unfamiliar with how digital product launches work and you have payment plans, somebody can say they have $1 million launch, a 100K launch, a 5K launch. But the real question is, on paper, is it in fact a 100K launch cash collected, or is it maybe 50,000 collected and 50,000 will be spread across 7 or 12 months in payment plans, right? Either way, they had a 100K launch or a 50K launch. However, on their end, that money is coming over time because that's what they gave their customers or clients the opportunity to do. So for 2 years straight, I was earning well over 600K, and that was just from digital product services. That did not include mental health services. The mental health business was multi six figures because I was written into programs, grants. I had some very, very part-time private practice clients, and then I would get called from time to time to do speaking engagements, and I would be reimbursed or paid for that in terms of serving like one-to-many versus one-to-one. So what tends to happen is, in my head, if I'm going through a season where I want to increase revenue again, because I'll share with you why I cut my revenue 2 years ago intentionally. But when I look back at what was, I start to compare my old results to where I am now. And then I may unintentionally start to get down on myself. Like, I don't know if anyone can relate to that, right? I don't know if you can relate to that. But I tend to do that more than I should. Okay. I've also noticed that when I should be resting, I can't freaking sit still. Now, some of the non-sitting still has a lot to do with my brain ruminating around, well, if I want to generate an extra 50K, then I could do this, and this. And ain't nothing wrong with the visionary ideas and the downloads. However, when I'm only in certain, days or weeks trying to compare my productivity results in comparison to who I was, that becomes a serious problem. Okay. So let's transition into seasons of business. I'm going to personally disclose with themes mine. And then we're going to go into how this all came up collectively together on a most recent coaching call, and it got deep in a very loving, deep, connected way with our clients. So these are my last 5-6 years. In 2020, unintentionally, because we all know what happened there, I started running a sprint in March, and it did not stop. In January, I joined a different mastermind, which is a high-level coaching program. It's not a course. It is a way for me to get in a room with other multi-6-figure, 7-figure digital product earners, and we are to help each other grow. So I want to specifically define that as a mastermind, because some people, a lot of therapists don't know what a mastermind is. And if I, for example, as the coach, if I'm their first investment, they may assume that it's more like a course. Now, granted, you may get access to a course shell with materials, but the coaching comes in for us to, guide you down the path. So in 2021, my goal for signing up for that mastermind was to slow down, then to speed up. So let me be clear. My revenue didn't slow down. It went up. But because my mindset during that year was more of a marathon, my slow down was focused on systems. Because in 2020, I had systems, but I grew way faster than expected. Put it like this. What I had in terms of revenue generated, customer served, client served in the year of 2020 was probably my goal for 3 freaking years, right? So I handled it, but it was rough. In 2021, I ran the marathon. I was in the mastermind. In 2022, because I had taken my time to build the systems, build a team up to 8 to 10 people at a time with contractors, W-2 employees, and things like that, I had just continued running a marathon. But I'm not going to lie, around November, your girl was tired. Now, November for those 2 years were okay because I typically did not have any active launches in November. By that point, we would have already onboarded our one-on-one coaching clients and our mastermind. We would have already sent out emails for more of an email launch for our private practice academy for those who want to work on it over the holiday break and then come back in January. But we typically reserve around Thanksgiving and we did this for a few years. We reserved around Thanksgiving into maybe the second week of January as rest, reset, recharge time. I was working, not during Christmas holiday, but I was working in November and in the beginning of January, but we were preparing for whatever our next season was. Okay. Now in 2023, this is where I just felt like I went back in training season again. Now, am I saying that I erased all of my marathons and sprints? Of course not. Was I saying that I'm like tired and that's why I went back into training and I slowed down? No. At that time, my kids were clearly getting older. They were entering into, at least my youngest son, into a regular grade, unlike daycare where low-key I can snatch them out and it's not a big impact. I mean, we know how to do homeschooling for daycare. But when it comes down to kindergarten and I knew what type of school he was going to in terms of the expectations, we really needed to cater to make sure that he got his needs met. And I didn't want to be irresponsible. Okay. So I intentionally cut more than half of my revenue. Intentionally. So I went from 600,000 to dropping off launches and programs that were valued at around $300,000. Now, some people may be listening to this and say, hell no, like, no. But I had to ask myself, am I going to keep running myself down to the ground? Now, yes, I had a team. I was working in my genius zone, but I'm still the visionary of my company. I'm still a mother. And one thing that we're not going to go in detail here, but let me know, hop over and chat with me on Instagram, on the DM or in the DMs, or if you're listening to this on YouTube through the audio version podcast, drop it in the comments. Like, let me know if y'all want me to actually do a few podcast episodes on what internally it really feels like to go against the traditional American dream in terms of women are now like doubling down, which is probably why our stress is so goddamn high, because we are not only in some instances the breadwinners, but we also fall into the role of wanting to be the mom. Clearly, you are a partner, you're a spouse, and then, maybe you the best cook in the house. Like, we don't know what each other's strengths and areas of improvement are. However, what I will say is that it's been damn hard. So if that's something that you want me to talk about, I will, but only if you want me to. Okay. So in 2023, like I said, I chose to cut my revenue. I chose to cut out a lot of live events. Instead of us having like 2 VIP experiences, which are our Vegas and New York small intimate events with like 8 therapists, we chose just to have a conference that year. And then in 2024, I really had to ask myself, am I even on the damn field? Like, am I training? Like, Keisha, what are you doing? Because I noticed that my energy started to change. I started to realize that if I didn't go to sleep on time, I was jacked up by the time my son got home from school. I actually enjoy helping him with his projects. I enjoy helping him with his homework, right? I enjoy, depending on the weather, to take him outside. And while he's playing, I can take a walk so I can get my steps in and double dip, right? And I can listen to a podcast and like habit stack. But what I'm getting at is I started to recognize that I still started to cut stuff out and I wasn't even mad about it. I was not. Now, to current date, 2025, I still feel like I'm training. I'm in the field area, but I feel like I'm training and I'm preparing for a marathon. But this time is different because I get to choose the race that I want to run. So what do I mean by that? I chose all my streams of income, but let's be clear, in 2020 and in those first 2 to 3 years, and then we got hit with inflation, and then I don't know what the heck kind of season we in, is burning fire, burn the boats, right? But at the end of the day, it was just like back to back to back to back. And it became like this expectation of like what I was going to launch, when I was going to launch. And I get hyped up by the community. So if I can do it, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to force myself. I didn't push myself into like panic attacks and sleep deprivation. Your girl was still getting her sleep. I was still eating. I was still going to the gym. I was still participating in all family activities. Don't get me wrong. But I just realized that as my kids specifically got older, that required more of me to be fully present. You know what I'm saying? And they would definitely, know. Okay. Like versus a baby, you know what I'm saying? They can go to a grandparent and stuff like that. They just having fun. But when the kids start talking, it's a little different. So that leads me into what I had shared with my friend recently. I took a walk earlier this week after I left the gym. I just put on my backpack from the gym and I, put on my headphones or whatever. I listened to part of the book and then I did like my walk, talk, prayer. And then I just got quiet and listened to like some beach music or something. And the comparison thing started to come up again. So what I have learned that works for me is when I talk out my thoughts, kind of like talking to ChatGPT, you can have something else organize your thoughts. So what I start doing is voice recording myself, because sometimes in my walk, talk, prayers, I would say something that I was like, wow, this could be a podcast episode. Wow, I can share this with my clients. Wow, I need to journal on this more when I get home. I need to share this with my team, whatever. So from time to time, if that little nudge hits me, I will press record on my iPhone and just like walk and just talk to myself, because I can always go back and listen to it. Just a little hack if you want to do that. So as I was going on my walk, the comparison thing was going back and forth in my head. And I was like, what was it about me in which I was like relentless on another level about hitting $1 million, right? Because my goal was to hit 1 million in 12 months, but I hadn't done that. I still haven't done that yet. And so I got quiet because I had a voice in my head, like my own voice say, won't you let him in? And I'm like, you're right. So I just got quiet. And I swear when I get quiet, he answers right away, like in 5 seconds. And so the download said something like, you're always comparing your current self or your future self to your old self. And have you ever thought that maybe I actually want you to 2x, 3x, 10x those results? So while you're sitting here trying to figure out how to get back to the old you and recreate that person, I'm trying to create a bigger you, TK. This is why I'm not giving what you're asking for right now, because that's not where I believe you should be. And that had me with chills. And when I just shared it with my friend, she was like, yo, now let me give y'all some backstory. The reason why I felt like that download hit the way that it did, you know how they say like things are right on time, is I have a habit of like listening to different things based on my mood. So I'll listen to like some meditation type stuff. I'll listen to some books, but I also listen to a lot of YouTube business education around sales, marketing, and mindset, right? So a person that I listen to that I've turned the community on multiple times is called Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. And I listen to his YouTube channel and his podcast because he pretty much gives nuggets about his book and a lot of his YouTube videos. So on one of his videos, he was specifically talking about things that he's going to stop doing. So sometimes what he alluded to is sometimes when we want something, we start thinking about what we need to add. And he said, why don't you look at what you need to remove? Because one of the reasons why you might not be getting the results that you want is because you got too much shit on your plate. And that's what I feel like was happening when I'm constantly comparing myself. I'm trying to do like my launch is the same way. Well, the economy is not even the same way. Our clients are not even showing up the same way. It's difficult, or I'm not going to say difficult, but it's different. Like the approach that I take now compared to what I did before of how I even get in front of my audience. For example, back then I was doing nothing but like audio podcasts. It wasn't until 2021 that I started doing video podcasts. But even that wasn't consistent because audio was easier for me. So I've been trying to force myself to do YouTube videos recently because they say in the industry, that's where podcast is at. But I'm gonna be real. That's why I don't publish that much, because if I got to sit down in front of a camera and get dressed and present myself the way that I want to present myself, I can pep myself up, but I really got to be in a mood. And I can tell when I'm in a mood because I will batch record 3 audios or videos. And you will know it because if you watch it on YouTube, I'll probably have on the same thing, or I'll do a car chit chat. I got on the same top, same headband. You know it. But at the end of the day, I'm delivering the message. But that walk and that download was so powerful. So now I'm going to walk you through what happened, kind of like how all these things come together with the internal comparison of trying to get back to a place I was, but God trying to make me bigger. And then understanding what season you're in your business and knowing that life circumstances will call you to show up in different ways. So this part is focused on how productivity may mean something depending on what season you're in. So I'm going to share with you some of the questions that some of our therapists in our Scale Academy had asked, and they focus on clinical supervision. Some of them do want to do group practice at some point, but they need to get their systems in place. And what they're doing right now, the alumni are working on building out community contracts and things like that. And then the newer students that came into the program, because it is a 12-month mentorship program, they are spending the first at least 90 days maneuvering through our private practice academy, making sure that their systems are in order to operate just for them. Because you want to think about it, how do you expect yourself to hire if you don't have any systems to hand off? So they're finding that even though they already had a practice, the systems that we have in our DTA program, like, is their checks and balances, right? So these were some of the topics that came up. How do you deal with wanting more, but you also know you want to slow down? And that reminded me of that season where I decided to purposely cut my revenue. But they didn't know that. I hadn't really shared that outside of our one-on-one coaching clients that are with us. So some of the things that we talked about and other questions that came up is how do you change your schedule? I have fear around that, right? So in a nutshell, with the 2 to 3 questions that came up, I got very personal. And I said, the easiest way for me to answer this question is to get personal, because I think it's just going to hit a little different. And this isn't something that I've shared on the podcast yet. So after I shared it, I'll share with you what I shared. But after I shared it, I was like, do you have any questions? And they were like, nah. Wow. They were like, wow, that was a lot, but in a good way, to the point where they're soaking it all up. They have hella notes, and they were like, if I got questions, I hit you up in Telegram, because they got one-on-one threads with me, like coaching on demand as part of this program. But they were like, thank you. And it was crazy because I felt like the message that I delivered specifically that day, whoever showed up on that call was supposed to be on that call, because it ended up becoming a conversation around also being a mom and being a business owner. Not saying that you have to be a mom to be at this program, but I always believe for live events and whoever shows up on a coaching call, you're supposed to be there. That is your divine assignment if that's your day you were there, right? And so as we talked about the slowing down and changing the schedule, I said, listen, give your clients a 60-day heads up. It depends on their symptomology. Change the schedule, because whatever you're trying to maneuver your schedule to get to, you ain't gonna get this time back. So I went in detail about how I've shifted my schedule multiple times for coaching programs over the last 5 to 6 years. And this is why when we go into a mentorship program or a live event, I have now aligned specifically my live events with when my son is out of school. If somebody suggests, oh, can you have a live event? If it don't align with my son's schedule, I ain't doing it, right? And so that's just what it is. Also, learning how to say no. I've learned that when I do look back on my past, I got more opportunities that were aligned with who I was becoming when I learned how to say no to just random stuff that would come up. Prime example, last Friday, my son had a carnival for their end of the year school thing. And I had told the PTO, the moms at the school, whatever, I'll help. I really prefer events. But internally, I know that there are certain seasons where it's like an absolute no, right? And it especially depends on the time of day. I do way better in the morning. I do way better when we're prepping for something. But if it's during a launch season, it is an absolute no. So it took the life out of me, that I almost said yes. But I said, that's not going to be doing me or my son any favors, because if I do go and help, I'm going to want to go home. I'm not going to be excited. There's going to be other things ruminating on my mind. Or matter of fact, I want to walk around with my son. You know what I'm saying? And if I set up, I'm going to be too tired to entertain my son while he's there. And so I thought about all of these things, and I'm just like, the fact that you even listen to all these things, you need to say no. You cannot go. And that's exactly what I did. But I really emphasized the idea that My kids are getting older. My son loves going to work with me when I go out of town. He loves seeing me work. He got his little iPad acting like he working. He'll get his little cup and act like he drinking tea. And he's 7. And he says, mommy, you work so hard, and I love how mommy work because he know mommy plays. Okay. But at the end of the day, I cannot get this time back. And as I look at my eldest as just turning 14 in January, he's my stepson. I've been knowing him since he was 4.5. For him to now graduate from junior high, it hits different when you like, wow, I've known you for a decade. I've seen you just start school. And now you about to go into your last 4 at the blink of an eye. They get big. And around this age, they don't even want to hang out with you for real. You know what I'm saying? And so I need to soak up every single summer. I need to soak up every single spring break. You will see me at Disney with my pass as many times as I can. They say you got to go 10 to 11 times to break even. I'm going 30. You know what I'm saying? When we board at home, let's go to Disney for 3 hours. Unless somebody's here from out of town or they bought a ticket, I'm not staying all day. And that's why I'm there that much. For those of you who were wondering, people like, why are you there so much? You there a lot. I got a pass. It is a good investment because it is better than sitting in this house. Okay. And sometimes I don't want to go to the playground. So let me know in Instagram, DM, or on the bottom of the YouTube video. Let me know what was your biggest takeaway. I'm going to recap. Do you have internal comparison? And God's trying to tell you, you plan too doggone small, or do you even give him room to come in and talk? What season of business are you in? Are you in a sprint? Are you in a marathon? Are you in training? Do you even want to be on the field? Okay. And lastly, does productivity look different for you right now compared to where you were before? Because you got to learn how to give yourself grace. Look around you. Look at what's going on around you. Look at your aging process. Are you neglecting a part of you that would actually make you better? Because you're trying to run yourself down to the ground, trying to figure out all this business stuff, when in reality, if you just give yourself Fridays or Mondays off and work in a 4-day work week, then you can actually take that day to maybe do 2 hours of paperwork and go get a massage. Maybe you can sleep in. Maybe you can go to the gym and do the real workout you've been trying to do. Maybe you don't have to do like me sometimes and take mom showers. I admit it. And you ain't in no rush. You can create a slow morning. So if there are any particular topics that you believe would help you go from overthinking, overwhelmed to overflow, then also drop that down in the comments. Or again, if you want to chat with me on Instagram, that is perfectly fine. I love to create podcasts on topics that you would see as beneficial to what I call the work-life integration model, design a life first business model, which is you come first. Because if you are the visionary of your business, like I think you are, then you have to be fully present to show up for your business and for the people that you serve. And you cannot do that if you drive yourself down to the ground. All right. So let God in. I will talk to y'all later. Have a great rest of your day. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning into Overthinking to Overflow, where we turn mental blocks into breakthroughs and build a life of alignment and abundance. If you loved today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs this message. Remember, overflow is your birthright. Get out of your own way, take inspired action, and I will see you in the next episode.